I was 12 years old when my family moved to rural Louisiana. My dad had just gotten a new job, and we were leaving behind the bustling suburbs for a quieter, slower life in the countryside. At the time, I wasn't thrilled about it. The idea of being far away from my friends and the life I knew made me uneasy. But my parents kept saying it would be good for us, a fresh start. The house was old, a two-story wooden structure that creaked with every step and groaned under the weight of the wind. It sat on a large plot of land, surrounded by thick woods that stretched as far as the eye could see. There were no other houses in sight, just trees and more trees. The nearest neighbor, my dad said, was about half a mile down the road. For the first few days, everything was normal. We unpacked our things, settled into our new rooms, and tried to get used to the quiet that seemed to hang over the place like a heavy blanket. At night, the silence was almost unbearable. No distant hum of traffic, no late-night chatter from the neighbors, just the sound of the wind rustling through the trees and the occasional creak of the old house. But then, something strange started happening. It began with our dog, Rusty. He was a big, friendly golden retriever who had always been more interested in belly rubs than anything else. But after we moved, he became different, nervous, jumpy, always on edge. He would sit by the window, staring out into the woods, his ears perked up as if he was listening for something. And at night, he would bark, long, deep barks that echoed through the house, waking us all up. At first, my parents thought it was just the new environment, that Rusty was adjusting to the unfamiliar sounds and smells. But as the days went on, his behavior only got worse. He would refuse to go outside at night, his tail tucked between his legs, and he would growl at the slightest sound. My dad tried to calm him down, saying it was just animals in the woods, but I could tell he was starting to get worried too. And then we met Nolan. It was a Saturday morning when Nolan showed up. My dad and I were outside, working on the fence that ran along the edge of our property when we saw a figure approaching from the road. At first, I thought it was just one of the workers who had been helping with the move, but as he got closer, I realized I didn't recognize him. Nolan was an older man, probably in his late 50s or early 60s, with gray hair that was thinning at the top and a face that looked like it had seen too much sun. He wore a faded plaid shirt and jeans that were frayed at the hems, and he walked with a slight limp. But what struck me most were his eyes, pale blue, almost gray, and sharp, like they were always watching, always calculating. "Morning," he said, his voice rough like gravel. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You must be the new folks." "That's right," my dad replied, wiping sweat from his brow. "Just moved in last week. I'm John, and this is my son." Nolan nodded, his gaze flicking to me for just a second before settling back on my dad. "Name's Nolan. Live down the road a bit. Thought I'd come by and say hello." "Nice to meet you," my dad said, extending a hand. Nolan shook it, but there was something off about the way he did it. Too firm, too quick, like he was just going through the motions. His eyes darted around the yard, taking in everything, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of something. Interest, curiosity, maybe even a little bit of hunger. "You folks settling in all right?" Nolan asked, still looking around. "Yeah, we're getting there," my dad said, forcing a smile. "House needs a bit of work, but it's a nice place." Nolan nodded, his eyes finally resting on me. "Y'all be careful out here. These woods can be tricky, especially for kids." There was something in the way he said it that made my skin crawl, but I didn't say anything. I just stood there, feeling his gaze on me like a weight. My dad must have sensed my discomfort because he quickly changed the subject, asking Nolan about the area, the neighbors, the best places to go for groceries. Nolan answered all the questions, but there was something strange about the way he talked. His sentences were clipped, his words carefully chosen, like he was hiding something. After a few minutes, Nolan said his goodbyes and limped back down the road. My dad and I watched him go, and I couldn't help but feel a wave of relief when he finally disappeared from view. But the relief didn't last long. That evening, my dad pulled me aside, his expression more serious than I had ever seen it. "I need you to listen to me, son," he said, his voice low. "I don't want you going anywhere near that man, you hear me? If you see him, you stay away. I frowned, confused. Why? He seemed nice enough. My dad shook his head, his jaw tightening. There's something off about him. I can't explain it, but I don't trust him. And I don't want you getting mixed up with him. Understand? I nodded, but the unease in my stomach only grew. My dad wasn't the kind of person to get spooked easily, and seeing him this concerned made me worry even more. That night, Rusty started barking again, louder and more frantic than ever. He was pacing back and forth in front of the window, his ears flat against his head, growling at something outside. I tried to calm him down, but he wouldn't stop, his eyes fixed on the darkness beyond the glass. I peered out the window, but all I could see were the trees swaying in the wind, the branches casting long, twisted shadows across the yard. There was nothing out there. At least, nothing I could see. But Rusty knew something was there. And whatever it was, it terrified him. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Nolan's face, those cold, calculating eyes staring back at me. I kept hearing his voice in my head, telling me to be careful, warning me about the woods. And every time I thought of him, a chill ran down my spine. A few days later, I was lying in bed trying to fall asleep when I heard it, the unmistakable sound of someone whispering outside my window. At first, I thought I was imagining it, that it was just the wind playing tricks on me. But the more I listened, the clearer it became. Someone was out there, just outside my window, whispering my name. My heart started pounding in my chest, and I felt a cold sweat break out across my forehead. I wanted to call for my parents, but I was too scared to move, too scared to make a sound. And then I heard it again. My name, whispered in that same rough, gravelly voice. Nolan. I forced myself to sit up, my hands trembling as I reached for the curtain. Slowly, I pulled it back, just enough to peek outside. What I saw made my blood run cold. Nolan was standing in the yard, his face illuminated by the pale moonlight. But there was something wrong with him. His skin was ashen, his eyes hollow, and his mouth was twisted into a grotesque grin. He was staring right at me, his head tilted to the side, like he was trying to figure out what I was thinking. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. I was frozen in place, my eyes locked on his, the fear paralyzing me. And then, suddenly, he was gone. I don't know how he moved so quickly, but in the blink of an eye, he had vanished into the shadows, leaving nothing behind but the lingering sense of dread that hung in the air like a thick fog. I jumped out of bed and ran to my parents' room, my heart racing as I banged on their door. My dad opened it, his face groggy with sleep, but when he saw the look on my face, he woke up fast. "What is it?" he asked, his voice urgent. "Nolan," I stammered. "He was outside. He was right outside my window." My dad didn't waste any time. He grabbed the shotgun he kept under the bed and hurried downstairs, motioning for me to stay close behind him. We checked every door, every window, but there was no sign of Nolan. The yard was empty, the woods silent, but I knew what I had seen, and so did my dad. The next day, my dad started asking around, trying to find out more about Nolan, but the more he asked, the stranger things got. None of the neighbors knew who Nolan was. There was no record of anyone named Nolan living in the area, no one who matched his description. My dad even went to the local police, but they didn't have anything on him either. It was like Nolan didn't exist. That night, my parents sat me down and told me we were moving. They didn't give me a reason, but I knew it had everything to do with Nolan. The next few days were a blur of packing and planning, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Every time I looked out the window, I expected to see Nolan standing there, that twisted grin on his face, those hollow eyes staring back at me. The night before we left, I had a nightmare. I was in my room, lying in bed, when I heard the whispering again. I opened my eyes and there was Nolan, standing at the foot of my bed, his face inches from mine. He was whispering my name over and over, his breath cold on my skin. I woke up drenched in sweat, my heart pounding in my chest. I sat up trying to catch my breath, but the fear was still there, gnawing at my insides. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, we loaded up the car and left the house behind. As we drove away, I looked back one last time, half expecting to see Nolan standing in the yard watching us go, but there was nothing. Just the empty house, the silent woods, and the lingering sense of dread that followed us all the way to our new home. My dad never talked about Nolan again, and neither did I. We tried to put it all behind us to move on with our lives, but I could never forget those hollow eyes, that twisted grin, the sound of his voice whispering my name. And sometimes, late at night, when the world is quiet and the darkness presses in, I can still hear him calling out to me from the shadows.